Now I've done a little editing on this file, and one of the things that I should probably do is save this. So just to make sure you know how to do that, that's pretty basic, but if you go File, Save, now I can call this my basic data. And now I'm going to see that title up here within my toolbar. And with this basic data, what I want to do is actually add in some more X and Y data. And I'm going to have two different experiments that I want to distinguish from each other. And I'm going to do that with text. So first of all, let's say I add in another set of data. Now notice I don't have to go to the next row immediately below this set. I can skip a line and type in other data below that. That's absolutely fine. And here's my next set of data, but I want to do some labeling for this. And think about how you might do this in a spreadsheet. What you would possibly do, I know in days when I was using spreadsheets, I might want to have some kind of a text label above this data and something here as well. Now, first of all, to do this here, I would need to shift my data down one, which I can easily do in DataGraph. For example, if I hold the Shift key, select all of this data, with those rows selected, if you click on the data table and then move to the side, you can then move all of that data down. So you can move it as a whole chunk of data. And then I can add in a label. So here, maybe I'll call this my control. And here is my experiment. Well, this is in red. Why is that? Okay, so what DataGraph is doing is it actually has built-in error checking. And because I created this column as a number column type, it sees right away that this is not a number, this is text, and so it gives it a red color to indicate that it might be an error. Now, this is really useful if, for example, you type in something by mistake that's text, or maybe there's some error in your data set where something got imported incorrectly. But for this, I actually want the text in there. So really, the way to think about this in DataGraph that I mentioned before is to think of it not like a spreadsheet, but more like a database. And in a database, you would never combine text and numbers in the same column like this. You would have another column that had the text in it that described the row of data. To do that, there's another column type that you can add, again, under the data menu. There's an add text column, or we can go over here to this toolbar and click this button with the little AB, and that adds a text column. Now it's going to add it to the right of wherever you happen to be within your data table. Not a problem at all. You can actually just dynamically click and drag any of these columns if you want to move their locations. And notice that when I did that, it also changed the location here within my column list. That's because these objects for each column are also things that I can click and drag to move them around. Again, very different than a spreadsheet. Okay, but so here I want to separate my text from my numbers. So I'm going to just cut and paste my labels that I gave here for each of my data sets. So this is better. This is in fact a very common way that people often organize things within a spreadsheet. But there's still one step further that we have to go, because we want every row where the data is from this control experiment, or my control, to be labeled as a control. And the same thing here, this experiment, I want the same label for all of these rows. To do that, there's a shortcut for this, because we have found that it's common for importing data from Excel or other spreadsheets to have this kind of format. So to make this easy for you, you can actually go to this text object. Actually, first, let me just give this a name here. I'll just call this type. And if you go to this gear menu on this object, click on that, and you'll see that a menu comes down, and there's a number of different options, but the one I want you to notice is the fill empty rows with previous non-empty row. When you click that, it automatically populates all of these rows below that label with the next label. This is a really handy trick that I've used quite a number of times to save me from having to repeat the same text over and over again. And for these rows where I don't need it, I can delete that. You can leave these blank rows here as well, or if you don't want them, you can delete any of these rows. You can right click on the row and remove it. I'd want to remove this from all of my columns if I get rid of that row. Or, you know, maybe I want that gap there. That's okay to leave that as well.